Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be presenting on behalf of Medicine 3. So this is a story of 70-year-old Mr. S from Chennai, who presented with history of recurrent transient weakness of the right upper and lower limb, with slurring of speech and facial deviation to the left for the past 2 days. A total of 3 episodes over a span of 36 to 48 hours. Each episode lasted about 2 to 3 hours, with spontaneous recovery to normal following the episode. There was no history of any preceding fever, vomiting, headache, no altered sensorium, no trauma or any seizures, no history of other cranial nerve involvement, any sensory loss, bowel or bladder incontinence, or any ipsilateral clumsiness or incoordination noted. Past medical history was significant for bronchial asthma for the past 20 years, for which he was on PRN inhalers. He also had BPH, and in 2018 he had presented with an intestinal obstruction. On evaluation, was found to have a sigmoidoileal fistula with a contained perforation and abscess formation, for which he had undergone a laparotomy followed by an ileocecal dissection and an end ileostomy, and later which was reversed with a Hartmann's procedure. Intra biopsies had shown no evidence of TB or Crohn's, and he was fine after that. On examination, his vitals were stable. Blood pressure was 130 over 80. There was no pallor, icterus, clubbing cyanosis, lymphadenopathy, or pedal edema. JVP was not elevated. There were no carotid bruits. He had a minimally scaly plaque with paronychia noted over the left finger, and bilateral dorsum of feet had eczematous plaques noted. Cardiovascular system examination, there were no murmurs. Respiratory system and per abdomen was normal. CNS examination wise, his GCS was 15 by 15. He had a subtle right UMN facial palsy on cranial nerve examination. Motor system examination was normal except for a right-sided pronator drift. Sensory system examination, cortical sensations were normal. Reflexes were all 2+, but there was a right-sided extensor plantar reflex seen. There were no signs of meningeal irritation and there were no signs of cerebellar dysfunction. So in summary, this is a 70-year-old man with recurrent transient neurological events in the form of weakness of the right upper and lower limb with slurring of speech, and on examination has a subtle right human facial palsy with a right-sided pronator drift and a right extensor plantar response. So the differentials considered at this point was an acute CVA, probably a lacunar infarct involving the left MCA territory due to involvement of the penetrating lenticular striate arteries, and presence with a recurrent TIA, probably a capsular warning syndrome. Other differential lower down was a Torts paralysis, but there was no definite history of cortical involvement or seizures present. So on evaluation, most of the baseline investigations were within normal limits. He had a mild normocytic anemia, but other than that, his ECG showed sinus rhythm, and other routine investigations were also within normal limits. His lipid profile was also normal, and his HbA1c was only 5.7, and APTT and PTINR were not deranged. So we went ahead with an MRI stroke protocol, which showed an acute infarct in the left corona radiator and the left external capsule, which corresponded to the perforator territory of the left MCA. There was also mild luminal irregularity of the intracranial vessels noted, and there were features of small vessel ischemic changes in the form of scattered TR hyperintense foci in the centrum semiovale and the corona radiator bilaterally. So MRA was, however, within normal limits. There was no large intracranial atherosclerosis. We went ahead with a 4-vessel carotid Doppler to evaluate the extracranial arteries, and that was also within normal limits. A CT angio was done from the neck till the circle of Willis, which showed mild atherosclerotic calcifications involving the bilateral ICAs, but no significant hemodynamic compromise or stenosis. Holter was within normal limits. There was no arrhythmia, and echo was also normal. There was no structural abnormality causing a cardioembolic stroke in him. Final diagnosis was that of an acute CVA, was that of a minor stroke involving the lenticulate branch of the left MCA. His NIHSS score was 3, and recurrent transient ischemic attacks, capsular warning syndrome. So I would like to discuss about capsular warning syndrome. So it was first coined by Donnan et al. In 1993. The classical description which they had given was a syndrome consisting of at least 3 stereotyped episodes of either a motor lacunar syndrome or a sensory motor lacunar syndrome occurring within a period of 24 hours. Now this period of 24 hours was later increased to 48 to 72 hours with later studies, but originally was defined as within 24 hours, and with complete recovery between the episodes involving 2 out of 3 body parts, the face, the arm or the leg, and with absence of cortical signs and symptoms on history and examination. Now, so this is basically a subset of TIA, and the incidence of capsular warning syndrome in TIA patients was about 1.5 to 4.5%. So it's important to recognize this subset of TIA because even with antithrombotic therapy, this has a high probability of developing into a capsular stroke. In fact, at 10 days, nearly 40% of patients with capsular warning syndrome developed a stroke versus 9.5% of patients with TIA. And this stroke risk was higher even at 1 year of follow-up. It was nearly 11.1% in the CWS patients versus about 2.7% in the other forms of TIA, and with an odds ratio of almost 3.5. And when they do infarct, the most frequent location of strokes in capsular warning syndrome is the internal capsule. But other locations noted have been in the thalamus, the midbrain, the pons, and the striatum. The pathophysiology is not really well known. The most widely accepted mechanism has to do with basically hemodynamic changes that occur in a small damaged perforating artery. Other potential mechanisms include lipohyalinosis because of age and because of hypertension, could be because of microaderoma formation, and could be because of vasospasm as well. So what is actually occurring during these fluctuations of the capsular warning syndrome? So as what is most widely accepted is that there is a pre-existing damage to these small perforating vessels, and whenever there are hemodynamic changes, for instance, if there's a sudden drop in your blood pressure, uh, it makes them susceptible to these changes, which results in transient flow failure, which may actually manifest as these fluctuations. But sometimes these fluctuations occur even when on an MRI there's an infarct already seen, which makes it a little hard to lend credence to this claim. So another school of thought is that in most patients, even in most patients with subcortical strokes, they often engage other regions. For instance, they engage the bilateral prefrontal, ipsilateral posterior parietal, and bilateral sensory motor cortices. This is as an attempt, as a compensation to do a particular motor task. So perhaps these fluctuations may result from failure to adequately engage these alternative networks which are involved in motor control in the acute phase following a stroke. Treatment is usually controversial because people feel that hypotension might predispose patients to developing an infarct. Raising blood pressure by means of IV rehydration or drugs such as phenylephrine have been tried in the past but have not delivered conclusive results. Dual antiplatelets are generally more effective than single antiplatelets as a secondary prevention strategy. Although they decrease clinical fluctuations and improve functional outcome, but they do not prevent reinfarction. In terms of anticoagulation in the setting of capsular warning syndrome may reduce the episodes of stuttering and the fluctuations which are seen, but it is unclear whether it actually affects the progression or the outcome of a completed stroke. What about thrombolysis? So with respect to thrombolysis, there was a recent retrospective study done which looked at about 72 patients with TIA who were randomized, who were getting either treated with a thrombolytic strategy or a non-thrombolysis strategy, and also treated with antiplatelets. And they found that there was no significant difference in the therapeutic effects between the groups. Good prognosis, however, was observed in about 84.72% patients at 3 months of follow-up in the group which was treated with RT-PTA. But 2 patients still had recurrent ischemic strokes despite thrombolysis at 3 months of follow-up. So in our patient, actually, he was started on dual antiplatelets initially. He had a minor stroke. His NIHSS was only 3. But despite being on dual antiplatelets, he had 2 more episodes of transient right-sided numbness. So he was anticoagulated with Clexane for a period of 5 days after discussion with neurology, during which period he was asymptomatic and had no further episodes. And he was discharged on dual antiplatelets for a period of 3 months. So take-home points would be to recognize capsular warning syndrome as a subtype of TIA with poor prognosis. And dual antiplatelets are generally better than single antiplatelets for secondary prevention in this setting. There might be some benefit with thrombolysis.
Thank you, Abhinav. Sheva, would you like to comment?
Ma'am, actually, we thought of presenting this case because in the ED, when we get patients with TIA, sometimes we discharge patients. But if it's a recurrent TIA, definitely this there is this entity called capsular warning syndrome. These patients needs to be admitted for sure and monitored and started on dual antiplatelets. So if they have recurrent TIA, never discharge the patient. That's what we wanted to bring out from this presentation. And our patient, we had to anticoagulate because of despite being on dual antiplatelets, he did have recurrent TIA in the ward also. So we gave him a low dose. He was around 70 kg, but we gave a 40 mg enoxaparin twice daily for 3 days actually. The maximum incidence of stroke is in the first 48 hours. So once he completed that period, we kept him for another 3 more days and then discharged him on the 7th day only. So the main take-home message is to admit such patients, don't discharge such patients, and then monitor them in the ward. That's what.
Thank you, Phoebe. Can I invite the other consultants to comment? Sir, Dr. Osi, Dr. Anand, or Dr. Sam, or any of the others? There's Nalini, Sheba, Manna. Okay.
How common are this, Abhinav, and among all the TIAs?
So
And
it's
what are the imaging correlates that are known? And does that also define the treatments?
So usually capsular warning syndrome constitutes about 1.5 to 4.5% of all TIAs. It's not very common, but it's about it's between about 1 to 5%. In terms of imaging correlates, usually when they do end up having an infarction, usually the infarcts are always subcortical, and the most common location is actually the internal capsule. And followed by you can have involvement of the external capsular region as well, the subcortical external capsular region, and it has also been described in the pons and the midbrain. And usually these are the territories which correspond to the perforating branches of the middle cerebral artery. In fact, these territories can also be involved with perforating branches of the posterior cerebral artery, the thalamoperforate branches of the posterior cerebral artery, or even paramedian branches from the basilar artery can also present TIAs like this, can present with TIAs similar to this.
Any other comments? If there are no further comments, thank you, Abhinav, for that presentation. Well done. And can I request all the faculty to complete the feedback form for the for the registrars who presented, and I'll hand over to Dawn.
Would like to thank Sudha ma'am for chairing today's session and moderating the discussions, and all the registrars who presented their cases really well and helped all of us have learned things better. Uh, if I can request all the residents to close this screen and go to the general page of the DOM Clinical Meeting 2021, where the quiz is uploaded. You will be able to access the quiz and uh, do it. Though this quiz is based on the today's presentations and 2 MCQs from each of the presentations which were done today. Thank you.
So we close the clinical meeting for today. Thank you very much. See you next week.